Would you be able to recognize a grandmaster in disguise? Presidential candidate Hillary Clinton was unable to do so when she appeared on the Steve Harvey Show recently. Speaking of candidates, the world's strongest chess players have been making their case known, battling it out on the chessboard for the chance to play Magnus Carlsen in November. With Peter Dawkers on site, we bring you the full update and let you know who we think has the best chance to play Magnus in New York. Speaking of Magnus, a documentary film is about to be released detailing the life and times of the reigning world champion. And finally, we ask all of you whether or not the press in chess create a culture of deference, not always asking the toughest questions of the world's strongest players. It's ChessCenter making chess dreams come true since August of 2015, and we're about to do it again right now. Let's go. Well, Sean, it seems like we just gave former world champion Viswanathan Anand the surprise of the week for the wrong reasons because of his poor performance in Gibraltar a couple months ago, and now for the right reasons because the Tiger from Madras is still capable of kicking some you-know-what, and he just took down Sergei Karyakin in round 11 of the candidates and retied the person he just lost to in Fabiano Caruana for the lead. Are we going to see a third rematch between Vishy Anand and Magnus Carlsen in New York in November? We just might. And how surprised would you be about that, Sean?
Well, you can't be shocked since it keeps on happening. But man, I kind of wish that it wouldn't. I'm a big fan of Vishy, though. I don't want to see him play Magnus in New York, but it really says something about his character that he's able to keep bringing this level of competitive spirit to the candidates tournaments, and the fact that he's still playing at this age at such a high level. So nothing but respect for that guy's character. But please, Vishy, don't go to New York.
Well, and before all the Anand fans freak out, it's not because of any personal. He's actually maybe my favorite player of this entire era, and it's just been something we've seen before. But Vishy would deserve it more than anybody if he worked his way back there, showing that he just has still some of the best preparation around. His tenacity and fighting spirit at the board is as good as any of the youngest players in the event. And for that, we have to salute the Tiger from Madras and see how the candidates finishes off. Maybe he will be in New York, and maybe we'll be there covering the third rematch between Carlsen and Anand. Well, do I even need to ask where you are, Peter?
Hi, Danny. I'm in the playing hall of the Moscow Candidates Tournament. As you can see, the board's right here behind me. The games of the 12th round have just finished, and it was another amazing round. I'm going to start my news report today with the cliche, it's much harder to stay at the top than to get there, because players who reach that top tend to lose their very next game again. And this is happening a few rounds in a row now. Vishy Anand, for example, he lost his game to Fabiano Caruana in the 10th round. Then he won an excellent game against Sergei Karyakin in the 11th round to reach shared first place. And then today he lost again to the other American Grandmaster, Hikaru Nakamura. And in fact, it was Sergei Karyakin again who lost that game to Anand. He's now back at the top because he defeated Veselin Topalov today in a very short, well, not short, but relatively easy game, in fact. So now Karyakin is at the top together with Fabiano Caruana, who drew with Levon Aronian today. So it's Caruana and Karyakin with 2 rounds to go.
And what if it stays that way? Can you explain the tiebreaks?
Yeah, well, the situation is as follows. The first tiebreak rule is mutual score. The second tiebreak rule is number of wins. And then the third tiebreak is Sonneborn Berger. Well, at the moment, Karyakin and Caruana have played 1 draw. And so that's equal. So the second tiebreak would be in effect at the moment. And Karyakin has more wins and also more losses, but he has more wins than Caruana. And he would be qualifying for New York if this was the final standings. But they still have to play in the last round. And then there's another round, of course, on Sunday, the penultimate round. It does mean that Caruana needs to score half a point more than Karyakin, either by beating Svidler or beating Karyakin in that last round.
What about the former world champion? Is Vishy out of it now with his loss?
Yes, Anand is only half a point behind those leaders. It is amazing. The 5-time world champion with 2 rounds to go still has a decent chance to actually qualify for his third match with Carlsen. But either Caruana or Karyakin is, of course, much more likely scenario.
And now finally, the last question is explain your countrymen.
Yeah, and that's the other strange story of this tournament, of course. Anish Giri drawing all his 12 games, despite getting several winning positions in some of those games. He just fails to convert them. And now on his 12th draw, it's amazing. He doesn't understand it himself either, I assume. And it's just an oddity. It doesn't happen that much in tournaments. So many draws.
Well, we appreciate all your coverage, and we'll let you get back to it.
All right. See you next week.
Bringing back Grandmaster Robert Hess. Those books are right where we left them. And Robert, we had plenty of candidates for this week's Move of the Week from the candidates tournament, pun intended. But in the end, we decided to go with one that seemed like such a great move and really just a huge win for the American Fabiano Caruana, maybe one of the biggest of his career to date. Tell everybody what he played here and just why that pressure was too much for the former world champion to deal with.
Yeah, here Fabiano is in excellent position. He can make a normal move like knight takes c4, regaining that pawn he sacrificed earlier with a good, very nice plan, a great position. But no, Fabiano was not to be deterred. He went bishop takes h6. Here the idea is after g takes h6, queen h5, launching an attack. It doesn't look so powerful, but the idea is simple. Knight g4 either takes on h6 or to f6, and all of a sudden white's pieces are just really launched into an attack. So Anand found nothing better than to sacrifice the knight back with knight e to f5 and transpose it to an ending. But Fabiano had gained such a great position that it wasn't enough for Anand to survive.
Yeah, to make a few more moves and speak on that ending, as you pointed out. It wasn't enough still for Vishy to hold, and he felt compelled to give up the exchange just to liquidate some of the pressure. And that eventually led to a simplification where the material was enough for Fabiano to win. Vishy resigned. To go back to that critical position where I know you and MVL both in your analysis for Chess.com's news reports pointed out that knight to d5 might have been the better way to give up the piece for Vishy, but not enough to hold the position, maybe still, and it was really a difficult move for the world champion to find, former world champion. So with it, we give Fabiano tons of credit for bringing the heat, putting the pressure, and winning this game, and with it, our Move of the Week award. Bringing on FIDE Master Mike Klein now, of course, to tell us what all the other chess stories are sweeping across the globe outside of Moscow, Russia. Mike, what do you got for us?
Yeah, Danny, besides the candidates, the big one is the Norway Chess Qualifier Tournament. Only 4 players this year going to be a double round robin. Recall that last year, Norway's number 2, John Ludvig Hammer, won the qualification tournament to get into Norway Chess. He's back. I'm a little surprised Norway didn't give him the automatic invite. But in any case, he's got to earn his way back in. He dropped his first round game, though, to Swedish Grandmaster Nils Grandelius. The other 2 players in the field are Norway prodigy Ari Antari, newly minted Grandmaster, and also women's world champion Ho Yifan. In round 2, though, just as we said these words here, Danny, Hammer is back. He has beaten his countryman Tari to level his score at 1-1. This tournament is part classical, part rapid. The scoring's a little bit complicated to get into on the show. But about one day after this Chess Center airs, we will know who the final qualifier is for the Norway Super Tournament.
Well, it'll be exciting for any one of those 4 players. And what's the status of the tournament they're trying to get into? We know the sponsorship, Altibox there for the Super Tournament in Norway does a great job headlining and bringing in the world's top players. And who are those top players in Norway's tournament this year?
It's a good question. Norway is no longer, I guess you could say, burdened by being in the Grand Chess Tour, so they have a little bit more leeway. They've invited Magnus, of course. If you have a tournament in Norway, you pretty much have to make sure he's going to come. They had a little more free reign with who they wanted to get, and for instance, Hari Krishna is going to be coming this year, Pavel Elyanov. So we'll get to see some new names playing amongst the world's elite. But speaking of Magnus, there's a new documentary coming out about his life. It's called Magnus. No surprise there. It's going to premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City very soon. And what I really like about what I've seen in the trailer is that documentary footage has spanned his entire chess career from when he was a little boy up until at least his first world title in Chennai. We get a lot of behind-the-scenes look of his mindset and some of the struggles that fame and great chess success comes with.
Yeah, and the trailer features greats like Garry Kasparov along with family members of Magnus giving opinions on just how early his talent was very clear to people. So we encourage the fans to check that out. But to move on to the other exciting chess news that came out this week in your other news report, presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, was on the Steve Harvey show, and she had to guess the identity of someone we know very well on Chess.com. Tell everybody a little bit more about this story.
That's right. The star is Grandmaster Irina Krush, who emailed both you and me, Danny, before the show. And I don't think either of us even understood the format until we actually watched it. Steve Harvey's guest was Hillary Clinton. As we know, she's campaigning to be the president of the next president of the United States. And through the series of a couple of questions, Secretary Clinton had to guess who the real Irina Krush was. They weren't exactly hard-hitting questions. But in any case, Clinton was kind of flummoxed at the end, and she deferred to Steve Harvey to ask his opinion. And you guys are going to have to watch the video to see whether or not Steve was accurately able to predict who the U.S. women's champion was.
Well, an exciting opportunity for Irina to be on a show like that, and always love when chess gets involved in current world events. Mike, we thank you for bringing us these topics. We'll look for some more hot, hard-hitting, and fast topics in Time Trouble.
Thank you to the real Denny Wrench.
Welcoming in Grandmaster Robert Hess for this week's Blunder of the Week. The hardcore chess segments, everyone knows that they're coming up as soon as they see your face, Bobby. And as soon as they see those books behind you, they know that you must have just played a just with those books, because you don't actually read those things. Speaking of the word Jadub, Robert, it was the word Jadub heard round the world in this game between Levon Aronian and Hikaru Nakamura. Please explain what happened regarding this controversy when Hikaru touched his king for a couple seconds too long, and why it was an immediately losing move in this very instructive rook ending.
Yeah, Danny, but before I do, let me empathize with Hikaru here. He's our first winner of consecutive Blunder of the Week award. And I lost 3 death matches, so we both live in infamy here on Chess.com. But on a more serious note, he touched his king for about 2 seconds and then tried to claim Jadub. He adjusts. But the rules of chess state you must say adjust before you touch your piece. And here, it's a particularly egregious mistake because after king to f8, the white king infiltrates via f6. And if the white rook were on any other square in the 7th rank, he wouldn't have the block after rook a6 check, rook d6. And now the king gets to sit on f6, and after this it's all downhill for black. So if we rewind just a few moves, instead of touching the king, he should have sat on his hands and then played a move like rook to e2, which covers the threat e5 to e6, and this position should be a theoretical draw.
Yeah, it's a very complicated position. We'll give the players that for sure, because Maxime Vachier-Lagrave he dove very deeply into this game, and if you haven't been following his game of the day analysis at chess.com/news, that is a you problem, because it's been amazing. So as you said, Hikaru should have sat on his hands, and if he had, he might have avoided back-to-back blunders of the week, but we had an interesting controversy, a huge win for the Armenian, and with that, we end our Blunder of the Week. Well, Sean, to find out what everyone's talking about in the world of chess social media this week, we're going to jump over to Twitter and see the tweet from Jonathan Manley. I believe it was his own blog he was referring to when he asked the question that I'm now going to ask you. Is there a culture of deference by the chess press to the chess players and organizers?
Absolutely, and I think it's understandable. The people who are following chess and love it the most are also the people who are reporting on it, and that's good. But I think it's also causing them not to ask some of the important questions. You know, looking at this Nakamura king touch issue, I really wish those questions had been asked of Aronian. You know, where is Aronian's indignation at this? Like, how could he do this? And where was Nakamura's bad boy attitude? And like, you know, that Jadub's the way it goes. You know, we didn't see any of these things. And I think that it was kind of incumbent upon the journalists at the time to make that conversation happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that really just for the growth of the game, regardless of the media perspective of I need to challenge these players with the hard-hitting questions, I think that the fans want to know how the players are feeling emotionally. How do they look ahead to future meetings with this player now that this personality conflict is building? Not what happened on move 27 in the Berlin defense with the novelty, right? I think that that's what the fans want to see. So I think the media owe it to the growth of the game, and a lot of people had opinions on this. We're going to bring it up here and show you a long thread that took place on Twitter. You had guys like Tarjei Svensson, well known as a Norway chess journalist who follows Magnus Carlsen, founder of Twic, Mark Crowther, that's The Week in Chess, and all kinds of people sounding off. We encourage you to do the same. Let us know how you think chess press conferences could be more interesting, and what the journalists owe the chess fans, even more than the chess players, in my opinion. And that's our social channel chatter topic for the week. Well, Robert, the only chess event that matters right now is taking a look ahead to the final critical phase of the candidates tournament as it wraps up from Moskva. We see Fabiano Caruana and Sergei Karyakin tied atop the leaderboard, but only by the hairs on their chinny chin, and they're young guys, so we know there aren't many. We've also got several players right there with 6 points. Of course, Vishy Anand still with 6.5. So as you take a look at the final matchups in the last 2 rounds, rounds 13 and 14, who do you give the upper hand to?
Well, Danny, it's advantage Caruana. In round 13, he is white against Peter Svidler, and he really dominates that matchup, a +3 score in their lifetime. So look for Caruana to press very hard to win that one. But in round 13 as well, we have Levan Aronian white, Sergei Karyakin black. The Armenian Grandmaster has a monster plus score against Karyakin, so look for the Russian GM to do his best to hold, because it's all in anticipation of a round 14 game, Sergei Karyakin white, Fabiano Caruana black. That likely will decide who faces Magnus Carlsen in New York in November. And Sergei with the white pieces will do his best to try to beat Caruana, but Caruana does have a good lifetime score against the Russian Grandmaster. But don't count out Viswanathan Anand. He had a devastating loss today to Hikaru Nakamura, but in round 13 he is white against Anish Giri, who he's never beaten in a classical game. But if he can win with white, he heads into round 14 playing black against Peter Svidler. Now that sounds like a daunting task, winning with black against Svidler, but Viswanathan Anand never has lost to Svidler in classical chess. He holds a +7 score in classical games.
Yeah, that's a monster plus score right there. And as you said, even though we don't have that matchup between Giri and Anand from round 13 shown here on the screen, nor do we have the matchups that are also taking place between Hikaru Nakamura and Veselin Topalov. Don't count out some of those guys to play spoiler. As you just said, Hikaru Nakamura taking down the former world champion may have helped his own countryman, Fabiano Caruana, on the way to winning the candidates. We'll see what those guys can do as far as mixing things up, the people that probably just don't have a chance anymore to win it. But excellent breakdown, excellent stats there. I think I agree with you that those must be the critical games. Can't wait for Karyakin Caruana in round 14. We'll watch it closely. Everyone can check out chess.com/news for your reports, your analysis, along with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and of course our full video recap. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll be talking about who will be playing Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship title later this year. As we bring back VDM Master Mike Klein, everyone gets sad because they know the show is coming to an end. Mike, kick off Time Trouble right with our first question.
Danny, Anish Giri has started the candidates with 11 straight draws. If he draws 3 more, what do we call that?
I think the award has to be forever known as the artist formerly known as Giri. Now, Veselin Topalov has dropped outside the top 10. He's currently ranked number 13 in the live ratings. Will we ever see the Bulgarian back inside the top 10?
You know, I don't know, Danny. Last couple times I've talked to him, he seems to lack some motivation and preparation. He's also on the north side of 40. I'm going to say no. Since our last ChessCenter where we discussed the Giocchio piano, Anand beat Aronian with it. You think Anand's a listener to the show?
Of course he is. Him, Hikaru, Fabiano Caruana, all of the world's top 10 watch ChessCenter. It's their religion, man.
Yep.
Now, Hikaru Nakamura, whether he would ever admit it or not, seems to be struggling a little bit against Fabiano Caruana with his last loss. Do you think he's affected by losing that rapid match in St. Louis back in September?
Well, that's just it, Danny. I don't think he'd ever admit it. But for a man that prides himself on being the top American for many years and on his rapid chess, I think it's got to affect him a little bit. After the touch move fiasco earlier in the tournament, do you think Nakamura and Aronian will shake hands in the final rounds of the candidates?
Well, we'll find out. It may be the last storyline everyone's talking about from Moscow. Of course, besides who's going to play Magnus Carlsen, they will play each other in round 14, so we'll see if they shake hands then. Speaking of that last storyline, Vishy Anand might just win this thing. Do we want to see the third rematch between Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand in November in New York?
Yes, Danny, I'll tell you why. Every epic needs a trilogy, and if Anand wins, we get to personally take the man to 6th Street, Indian Row, and have a giant party.
Yeah, we do. We have a huge fan base in India. I know he has maybe the biggest fan base in the world rooting for him. So we'll see how things wrap up there. Make sure you cast your vote in our poll question, fans. Mike, thank you for joining us in Time Trouble. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Danny.